one thing that we definitely have to do is to work, is to improve the code of the use cases, because at the moment there is repeated code, which is always a red flag. That's something to be done. Like, look at the way these fetch have been done. They are exactly the same. But most importantly, there is a direct use of a technology inside the use case. So we're using the fetch, but the reality is that this can be something else. It could be Axios, or it could be a GraphQL call. It could be anything, and the use case shouldn't be dependent of this type of code. What we want to do, same as we did for React, you guys see we pushed the React away. We pushed the frameworks out. We hate React. um, we should try to push also the other technology dependency away from the inner part of the system. So what we're going to do, essentially, we're going to extrapolate the fetching part and create another class, which should be the like a client, like a generic client, which can execute the code itself, and it can be swapped. So what will happen is that this class will inject it inside these use cases via constructor, and then we would have a lot of advantages. One is that we can swap it, and also in the test environment, we have more flexibility of swapping things around. So let's do it. This won't be too long. So this is how we're gonna do it. Let's add a new directory called infrastructure. And then inside here we're gonna add HTTP. Here we create an HTTP client, new file, HTTP client.ts, and this will be something like that. HTTP client as a get. In theory we'd have a post, but now we need just get. It's gonna return a promise, and we will use fetch here. So you guys see the difference? We are centralizing the technology used into the HTTP client. So this one then will be injected here in the constructor, and it will be then used when we are calling the fetch. We are passing the URL in the get. So now we have to juggle around a little bit who's doing what, but essentially the maker, we will use the maker pattern so that the maker will prepare the URL, and then it will instantiate the HTTP client, and it will pass it to the use cases. So let's start creating dependencies from the use cases to the HTTP client. We just need to expect a private HTTP client, which is going to be of type HTTP client. Boom, is using our suite alias. Very nice. We're going to do the same in the other use case. Import it. Sweet. Okay. So now we have the HTTP client available in the use case from the constructor, right? So we can use it here and here instead of doing the fetch directly. So let's do it. We stay inside the try, and we can say that the response, we have to await this dot HTTP client. So we are assessing the HTTP client which has been passed by a constructor. And we can say get we need to pass the URL, same as here, but we don't call the fetch directly. And actually we need to say type, let's just say any for now here. Okay, fixing parentheses. And now we can get rid of this response and also this throw error, because this is managed inside the HTTP client itself, right? So if you take a look here, we have error management in there. So let's clear this code and save it. Let's test it, just to enlarge it a bit. So we got a Wi-Fi. We need to test the loading devices, which is this one. It's not working. Unauthorized BSSID. That's right, because it was the one not of my Wi-Fi, but this one is working, so perfect. Now we have to do the same for the use case of the loading Wi-Fi. So we stay inside it. Try. We say const response await this HTTP client get any. I like to close the parentheses straight away, and then the URL is simply this one. We will improve the URL as well, not to have them hard-coded like that, but for now, it serves the purpose. And let's finally clean this one. Save. Let's refresh and see if the nodes are loading. Seems they are there, but so they are calling them, but they are not displayed. Let's have a look. So here we can say just wait for the data. We don't need to add response and then await again for the response JSON, as we are returning the JSON directly here. So let's clean this. Just say simplify like that. We're gonna wait this client, and the same thing here. And the load Wi-Fi device use case, we just get the data and don't get the JSON again. Cool. Let's test it. The Wi-Fi are there, and then the devices seems to be working or pending. Boom, we have them. So good. We have successfully refactored these. Also the maker. Now we are injecting the HTTP client via the make. It's sort of manual dependency injection. Some other framework like Angular, we would have the dependency injector mechanism, which is doing this for us. But here we have to, being React, we are in charge of managing this sort of technology and dependencies. So when we make the load Wi-Fi and when we make, just make this one smaller. So here are the maker I was saying, and we're injecting the HTTP client here and there. And so everything is prepared when we call this function. We get the use case plus all dependency, which will then be passed inside the constructors. Next question could be, what about testing? Now we change the internal structure a little bit of these use cases. The constructor requires an HTTP client, and then things are now they're done differently. Do you guys think they are gonna work? We have end-to-end and unit test. So I leave it up to you to think about it a little bit. But here is the answer. Essentially, the end-to-end test, which is testing the functionality from the user perspective, we don't in the end-to-end test, we are not instantiating those use cases and so on. We expect them to work seamlessly, right? And in fact, they do. Nothing changed here because all the interactions are still working. So we are not looking inside of these components whatsoever. We are just moving the mouse, clicking, expecting result. But what about the unit testing? Let's see. So let's clear this stuff and npm run test. Drum roll. Yes, the tests themselves, they're not correctly instantiated because when we look at the way we were doing that, we were trying to run those tests. So unit, and then we have these two use cases. Actually, they statically fail. The VS Code is capable of telling us that there's something wrong because now we need to pass the HTTP client here. So that's good. That's expected. They are doing different things, unit test and end-to-end, and we are looking at a different level how things are working. So sometimes when we refactor the internal part of the system, we expect the unit test to fail. So let's fix them. So let's update it. Let's add the new HTTP client here, like that, and also here. Cool. It's complaining about this each. We need to import it here apparently explicitly so that the types are happy. Good. Now we do the same thing. New HTTP client. Let's be a little bit lazy and copy here and here. So good. Let's see if they run okay. Let you see up here on the right corner. Run test. Okay, there is an error. I mean, the tests are failing. And this time is about the error message return. And that's because having changed what we are returning, at the moment we are returning HTTP error, so it's been centralized. So what we can do is to grab the received message, because that's the expected one, and add it here, which is more generic. So one here and one there. Also, let's get rid of that. Because remember, with this line, we are kind of forcing to the response to have an error, but we don't care about injecting the message itself here. We need to, the important part of this is to see if an exception has been thrown. Okay, let's run it again. And boom, everything's passed. So unit tests are working as well. Perfect.